Hi guys, tonight we're slipping back to the first vineyards. Before labels, cellars, corks, sommeliers. And that one friend who says they can taste wet limestone in everything. You're walking into a world where grapes grow wild on tangled vines, where clay jars sit half buried in cool earth, and where someone, somewhere, discovers that fruit juice left alone does something strangely magical. It fizzes, it warms, it changes the mood of a room. What kind of accident becomes a civilization's favourite ritual? What kind of drink follows humans from caves to temples, from farmyards to royal courts, from rough wooden cups to crystal glasses? So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and while you're getting comfortable, comment your location and your local time, because it is quietly lovely to imagine people all over the world drifting into the same old story under different skies. Now, dim the lights. You find yourself standing in a valley long before Europe knows what it will become. The air is cool at the edges, warm in the centre, as if the day has not quite decided whether to leave. Around you, wild grapevines climb through trees and thorny shrubs, curling themselves around branches with patient little tendrils. Their leaves are broad and rough beneath your fingers. Their fruit hangs in uneven clusters, some berries dark as ink, some still green and sharp, some split open by birds or weather. The smell is not the polite scent of a modern wine shop. It is richer and messier. Crushed fruit, damp soil, bark, leaf mould, smoke from a distant fire, and the faint animal warmth of people living close to the land. You hear insects ticking in the grass. Somewhere, a bird gives a brief, irritated call, as if annoyed that humans have arrived and started touching everything. Near a shallow shelter of stone and wood, people gather fruit in woven baskets. They do not think of themselves as inventors. They are hungry. They are observant. They know which berries are sweet, which roots can be eaten, which mushrooms are best avoided unless the evening needs to become extremely surprising. The first wine is not born in a polished vineyard. It is probably born from forgetfulness, abundance, and a little bit of natural chemistry doing its usual quiet work. Grapes carry wild yeasts on their skins. When the skins break and the juice is exposed, yeast can feed on sugar and turn it into alcohol and carbon dioxide. No priest is required. No silver goblet, no velvet robe, just ripe fruit, a container, warmth, and time. Humans, to their credit, are very good at leaving things somewhere and then coming back later to see what happened. Perhaps you crouch beside a skin bag, a hollowed wooden vessel, or a clay-lined pit. The juice inside has darkened. A tiny bubbling tremor moves across its surface. It smells sweet, sour, earthy, and strangely alive. Someone tastes it. Their face tightens first, because fermented grape juice is not exactly fresh fruit. Then their eyes change. There is warmth in the chest, lightness in the head, a softening of worry. A small, stunned silence passes through the group. Well, that is new. No one writes this moment down. Of course. Writing has not yet arrived to turn everything into evidence and administrative burden. So the beginning of wine sits in the misty country between archaeology and imagination. Historians still argue whether people first valued fermented grape juice as a food source, a medicine, a ritual substance, or simply a pleasant accident that made a difficult life feel briefly kinder. The honest answer may be all of these, because humans rarely keep useful things in only one category, especially if the useful thing makes winter evenings less grim. The mainstream historical fact is that some of the earliest strong evidence for grape wine comes from the region around the South Caucasus, especially ancient Georgia, where people were making wine thousands of years before classical Greece and Rome turned it into poetry, trade, and endless social rules. Archaeologists have found traces of tartaric acid, a chemical marker associated with grapes, inside ancient pottery. These jars suggest that people were not merely eating grapes, they were fermenting them, storing them, and returning to them with intention. So you move eastward in your mind into a Neolithic settlement where clay vessels rest near packed earth floors. The homes are low and simple. Smoke curls from hearths. Dogs nose around the edges of human activity, probably pretending to be helpful. A child watches an older woman press grapes by hand. The fruit collapses with a soft wet sound, a gentle pulping, sticky between the fingers. The juice stains skin. Purple shadows gather under nails. In the evening air, there is the scent of ash, grain porridge, sheep wool, and crushed grape must beginning to turn. This is not yet the wine of Europe's monasteries or merchant ships. It is not the wine of kings, taverns, church altars, harvest songs, or glass bottles sealed with cork. It is closer to food, closer to season, closer to the body. It belongs to the rhythm of gathering and waiting. The grape is summer's sweetness, but fermentation stretches that sweetness forward. It makes time negotiable. A cluster of fruit that would rot becomes a drink that can last. That may not sound glamorous, but for early communities, preservation is a kind of power. Civilization does not begin only with walls and laws. Sometimes it begins with learning how to keep something from spoiling. You can feel the importance of that in the cool weight of a clay jar. Its surface is gritty under your palm, not smooth like modern ceramics. It smells faintly mineral and damp. A lid of woven fibre, skin, or clay rests over the top. Beneath it, the liquid is changing in the dark. That darkness matters. Containers matter. Sedentary life matters. To make wine with regularity, people need more than grapes. They need places to store them, vessels that do not leak, social memory, repeated practice, and enough trust that no one drinks the whole experiment too early. A difficult standard, frankly, in any century. As farming spreads, vines become companions to settled communities. Wild grapes are not obedient. They climb where they like. They produce uneven fruit. Some vines taste better than others. So people begin to notice. This vine is sweeter. That one ripens earlier. This cluster ferments into something softer. That one tastes like regret wearing a leaf. Over many generations, selection begins. Not in the modern laboratory sense, with charts and stern lighting, but through hands, memory, taste, and habit. Cuttings can be moved. Vines can be encouraged. A plant that once tangled through forests becomes something humans invite nearer to home. The atmosphere around these early settlements is both practical and sacred, though those words may not be separate yet. The same jar that stores nourishment may also belong to a feast. The same drink that warms the body may be offered to ancestors, spirits, or gods whose names are now lost. Fermentation is easy to explain scientifically today, but to early people it must have looked like transformation with a personality. Juice becomes wine without visible fire. It breathes. It foams. It changes mood and behaviour. It can comfort, heal, intoxicate, confuse, and inspire bad singing round a hearth. No wonder it attracts ritual meaning. A quirky little tidbit rests here too. Some scholars and enthusiasts have suggested that early people may have noticed animals eating fermented fruit and behaving oddly. Birds, elephants, monkeys, and other animals have all been observed showing interest in overripe fruit, though the details are often exaggerated because humans deeply enjoy imagining drunken wildlife. It is tempting to picture a prehistoric observer watching a tipsy bird wobble off a branch and thinking, with admirable scientific curiosity, perhaps we should try that. Is that exactly how wine began? Probably not. Is it a delightful possibility to keep beside the fire? Absolutely. You walk deeper through this early world and notice how little separates survival from celebration. A feast might not be grand. It could be roasted meat, stored grains, gathered nuts, a bowl of fermented juice shared carefully. Yet the emotional shape is familiar. People sit closer than they must. Voices lower as the night grows dark. Someone laughs too loudly. Someone sings a line everyone knows. Someone remembers the dead. Someone flirts badly. Humanity, it turns out, has always contained dinner conversation. Wine helps gather these moments into form. It is not merely a drink, it becomes a social signal. To share it is to say, there is enough for more than one mouth. To store it is to say, the future exists, and we are preparing for it. To offer it in ritual is to say, the visible world is not the whole world. Long before Europe builds cathedrals or crowns emperors, fermented grape juice is already teaching people the habits that settled life requires: patience, cooperation, memory, craftsmanship, and restraint. Especially restraint. A vineyard is basically a long lecture in waiting. The vine itself teaches this lesson with almost comic severity. Plant it, tend it, prune it, protect it, and still the weather may ruin everything. Too much rain, and the fruit swells and splits. Too much heat, and the grapes shrivel. Birds descend like tiny unpaid tax collectors. Insects arrive with no respect for human plans. The vine asks for attention across seasons, and in return, it offers abundance that must be handled at the right moment. Harvest too early, and the juice is sour. Wait too long, and rot creeps in. Wine begins as agriculture, but it quickly becomes timing. You stand now in the soft noise of a harvest. Feet press grapes in a shallow basin. The sound is wet, rhythmic, oddly peaceful. Skins break, seeds shift, juice runs. Hands lift baskets. Clay jars wait in rows, their mouths open like patient listeners. The people working here do not know that millennia later, others will argue about terroir, vintage, appellation, and whether a bottle should breathe, as if it has been holding in a secret. They only know the season is generous, and generosity must be captured. The first sip from one of these early jars would not taste like the wines in a modern glass. It might be cloudy, sour, smoky, resinous, or mixed with herbs, honey, tree sap, or other fruits. Ancient drinks often blurred categories. Wine, medicine, preserved food, and ritual potion could overlap comfortably. The modern desire for clean labels would seem fussy here. These people are not trying to win awards. They are trying to make life last through cold months, hard labour, illness, and uncertainty. If the drink tastes strange but works, excellent. If it also makes the evening glow, even better. And gradually, across landscapes of stone, river, forest, and field, the knowledge travels, not as a single invention announced with trumpets, but as a habit carried by families, traders, migrants, and neighbours. Someone learns that clay is better than a leaking basket. Someone learns that buried jars stay cooler. Someone learns that sealed vessels protect the drink. Someone learns that certain vines deserve care. The knowledge passes quietly, mouth to ear, hand to hand, season to season. You can almost feel Europe waiting in the distance. Though no one standing among these first vines would call it that. The continent is not yet a wine map of Burgundy, Bordeaux, Rioja, Tuscany, the Rhine, the Douro, and the Danube. It is a patchwork of forests, rivers, coasts, and communities. But the essential idea is already alive. Grapes can become memory, land can become flavour, time can become something you drink. As night settles over the valley, the settlement grows softer. The fire lowers, the clay jars are covered. The vines outside darken into tangled silhouettes. A cool breeze moves through the leaves with a dry whisper. You hold a rough cup in both hands. It is warm from your fingers, cool at the rim, and scented with the faint sour sweetness of fermented fruit. The taste is unfamiliar, but the feeling is not. You are part of a circle. You're safe for this moment. The stars above are bright, indifferent, and very old. The first wine does not civilize Europe by itself. That would be a little much to ask of grape juice, even ambitious grape juice. But it gives people a tool for gathering, storing, trading, worshipping, celebrating, and remembering. It teaches patience in the vineyard, skill in the vessel, trust at the feast, and meaning in the shared cup. From these early jars and wild vines, a long path begins, one that will move through temples, ships, farms, empires, monasteries, taverns, laboratories, and quiet evening tables where someone pours a glass and feels, without quite knowing why, connected to something ancient. For now, you remain in the beginning. The world smells of smoke and fruit. The ground is firm beneath you. The night insects continue their tiny music. Somewhere nearby, yeast is working invisibly in the dark, turning sweetness into warmth. No one fully understands it yet. No one needs to. The jar rests in the earth, patient as sleep, and the vine outside curls toward another season. You stand beneath the pale gold light of the Nile Valley, where the river moves with a slow confidence that makes human plans look pleasantly temporary. The air is warm, thick, and bright. Mud bricks hold the day's heat. Reeds sway along the water, making a dry whisper like robes brushing stone. Somewhere, a donkey complains with the emotional range of a minor official denied a promotion. The smell around you is layered and living river silt, baked earth, lotus flowers, smoke from cooking fires, and the sweet, heavy scent of dates drying in the sun. Here, wine is no longer just a farmhouse wonder. It has become a marker of status, worship, trade, and distance. In ancient Egypt, beer is the everyday drink, nourishing and familiar, made from grain and shared widely across classes. Wine is different. Wine is rarer, more expensive, more closely tied to elites, temple rituals, and the royal household. If beer is the reliable neighbour who helps repair your roof, wine is the guest arriving in fine linen and pretending not to notice everyone staring. You walk toward an estate where vines grow in ordered rows, trained across wooden supports and garden trellises. The scene feels surprisingly careful. Workers move under the heat, their feet sinking slightly into the dark soil that the river has gifted to the land. Grape clusters hang in shade, protected from the fiercest sun. The leaves are rough when you brush them. They catch dust on their surface. The fruit, when pressed between fingers, gives way with a soft skin pop and a cool bead of juice. The Egyptians did cultivate vineyards, especially in the Nile Delta and oasis regions where conditions were kinder to the vine. Tomb paintings show grape harvesting, treading, pressing, and storage in jars. That is the mainstream historical fact sitting calmly in the warm air. Egyptian wine culture was well organized, visually documented, and closely associated with wealth, ceremony, and the afterlife. You can almost see the artist watching carefully, then turning labour into elegant lines on plaster walls, because apparently even ancient accountants of fruit wanted good branding. You enter the rhythm of harvest, baskets fill. Men carry grapes to shallow vats, feet press fruit in steady motion, ankles stained, laughter rising and falling. There is a wet slap of skins underfoot, a creak of wicker, a murmur of instructions. Juice runs into vessels, dark and shining. Nearby, clay jars stand ready, some pointed at the bottom so they can be set into sand or racks. Their surfaces are cool in the shade, gritty beneath your palm. A worker seals one with mud or plaster, pressing the top smooth. Another marks it, because even paradise needs inventory management. Some Egyptian wine jars were labelled with information such as the vineyard, year, quality, or estate, especially in royal and elite contexts. Imagine that long before modern labels describe hints of blackberry, cedar, and someone's private feelings about oak barrels. Officials were already recording origin and vintage. A jar might announce that it came from a particular domain, under a particular authority, in a particular regnal year. Wine becomes a message in clay. It says where it was born, who controlled it, and why it matters. You follow one of these jars from the estate into a world of storerooms and offerings. The atmosphere changes. You move from the white brightness of fields into a dim chamber where the air is cooler and drier. Dust rests on shelves. The smell is of sealed clay, old straw, resin, and faint fermentation. Jars line the space like sleeping animals. Each contains not only liquid, but labour, land, water, authority, and waiting. In temples, wine belongs to the gods. Priests pour it as an offering, placing it among bread, meat, incense, flowers, oils, and other gifts. The gesture is not casual. It is part of maintaining cosmic order, that fragile balance the Egyptians imagined between life, death, nature, kingship, and the divine. You hear sandals on stone, linen brushes skin, incense smoke thickens the air with a sweet, woody scent. A cup is lifted. Red wine catches the light, glowing like a small captured sunset. Then it is poured out or presented, transformed by intention from drink into devotion. Wine also travels into tombs, because the Egyptian afterlife is not supposed to be a bare waiting room with bad lighting. It is imagined as a continuation, a perfected life where food, drink, status, and comfort still matter. The dead require provisions. Painted banquet scenes show guests with cups, musicians, dancers, and tables heavy with offerings. You pass through one such painted chamber in your mind. The walls are alive with calm movement. A servant leans forward with a jar. Musicians pluck strings. The painted air seems filled with perfume, floral garlands, and warm oil. The guests are idealized, serene, forever at a party that politely refuses to end. A scholarly uncertainty lingers among these scenes. Specialists still debate how ordinary access to wine truly was outside elite circles, because artistic images and tomb goods mostly preserve the lives of people wealthy enough to make images and tomb goods. Very convenient of them, and also very annoying. The evidence speaks clearly about kings, nobles, priests, and estates, but less clearly about the full range of everyday drinking habits. Wine may have appeared at certain festivals or special gatherings beyond the palace world, yet its cost and symbolism kept it wrapped in prestige. You step from temple shade toward the riverbank, where trade widens the story. Boats wait against the mud, their hulls creaking softly. Sailcloth snaps in the wind. Ropes scratch against wood. Men shout over one another in a dozen practical tones, proving that shipping has always required confidence, sweat, and mild irritation. Amphorae and jars are loaded among grain, oil, metals, timber, textiles, spices, and luxury goods. The Nile carries them north and south. The sea waits beyond. Across the eastern Mediterranean, wine becomes a traveller. The Phoenicians, master sailors and merchants from cities such as Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos, help spread vines, wine, amphorae, and drinking habits around the Mediterranean world. Their ships move along coasts and between islands, following stars, currents, ports, and profit. You stand on the deck of one of these vessels at dusk. The wood is warm beneath your bare soles. Salt dries on your skin. The air smells of pitch, rope, fish, cedar, and stored cargo. Amphorae sit wedged in place, their tapered bases fitting neatly into racks or soft packing. The sea slaps the hull with a patient, dark rhythm. Here wine is not only sacred, it is commercial, it is portable wealth. A good jar can travel farther than a spoken promise, and with less opportunity to embellish itself. Merchants know which ports want which goods, which rulers demand tribute, which harbours a safe, and which officials require a gift before remembering how helpful they are. Wine joins networks of exchange that connect Egypt, the Levant, Cyprus, Crete, Greece, and farther shores. It moves with languages, weights, measures, myths, sailors' jokes, and the occasional questionable bargain made at sunset. A quirky tidbit floats in this salty air. Some ancient wines were mixed or treated with ingredients that sound more like a medicine cabinet than a dinner menu. Resin, herbs, honey, seawater, spices, and even aromatic oils could be used in different places and periods to preserve, flavour, or ritualize wine. The ancient palate was bold. Modern drinkers may debate whether a wine is too earthy, while an ancient drinker might calmly sip something resinous, herbal, and salty, then declare it excellent for the stomach, the gods, and the general disappointment of being mortal. You watch a trader lift a small cup and taste from a newly opened jar. He rolls the liquid in his mouth, narrowing his eyes. Around him, scribes count goods, dock workers shift loads, and gulls scream like tiny lawyers. The wine is darker than watered river beer, sharper on the tongue, with a preserved sweetness beneath the sour edge. It warms quickly. It does not belong to one place anymore. Its identity is becoming a map. In Egyptian banquets, the cup can reveal both elegance and excess. Elite guests recline or sit in fine clothing, perfumed cones melting slowly on their heads in some artistic depictions, releasing fragrance as the evening grows warm. Whether those cones were real substances, symbolic objects, or artistic conventions has been debated for a long time, because history enjoys leaving tiny mysteries on people's hairstyles. You breathe in imagined perfume, lotus, wine, roasted meat, and oil lamps. Music trembles softly. Fingers tap time. The room glows with painted colour and polished surfaces. Yet wine also carries danger, and the Egyptians knew it. Texts and images could treat drunkenness with humour, warning, or moral concern. A cup opens the social world, but too many cups open the floor beneath you. That little truth needs no translation across centuries. You hear laughter turn loose and bright. A servant steadies a guest. Someone makes a remark that will be remembered by everyone except the speaker. Civilization advances, but the office party energy is already present. Still, the sacred cup remains the deeper current. Wine's red colour links easily to blood, vitality, danger, renewal, and divine power. In certain myths and rituals, red drink could carry intense symbolic force. The line between nourishment and offering grows beautifully thin. To pour wine is to create a bridge earth to God, living to dead, ruler to cosmos, host to guest, merchant to buyer. The same liquid can conceal a transaction, honour a deity, comfort a mourner, impress a visitor, or decorate a feast with just enough luxury to make everyone sit up straighter. You move through an Egyptian storeroom at night. Outside, the Nile glimmers under stars. Inside, sealed jars hold their dark contents in silence. Their labels are dry beneath your fingertips. You feel the raised strokes, the marks of officials and estates. These containers make wine disciplined. They give it identity, authority, and memory. A jar can say, "This came from royal land. This belongs to a temple. This was prepared for the journey beyond death. This is not merely drink. This is order in liquid form." Then the sea wind returns. A Phoenician harbour flickers with lamps. Purple-dyed cloth hangs in shadowed stalls. Cedar beams are stacked near the quay. Sailors speak in low voices while checking knots. Wine jars are traded, copied, refilled, admired, and occasionally watered down by people with flexible ethics. The merchant world does not diminish wine's sacred aura, it spreads it. Every voyage gives the drink new meanings. In one port, 'Tis a luxury from abroad, in another an offering, in another a habit of the wealthy, in another a seed of future vineyards. By the time you settle beside the dark water, cup in hand, wine has become more than fermented grape juice. It has learned how to wear symbols. It can dress itself in gold, linen, clay, incense, salt, and royal ink. It can sit in a tomb and promise abundance. It can cross a sea and return as prophet. It can shine beneath temple lamps and make a human hand feel, for a moment, connected to powers too large to name. The river air cools, reeds whisper. A boat knocks gently against its mooring. Somewhere a jar is sealed for a god, another for a noble, another for a ship that will leave with the dawn. You taste the wine and feel its warmth settle slowly, not as surprise now, but as ceremony. Around you, the old world breathes in grain, mud, perfume, salt, and stars. The cup is small, but the roots opening from it are wide. You step into Greece as evening gathers over whitewashed walls, tiled roofs, and hillsides silvered with olive trees. The air is dry, fragrant, and faintly dusty. Time clings to the slopes. Smoke from hearths drifts through narrow streets. Somewhere a goat bell clicks with the serious rhythm of a tiny philosopher. You hear sandals on stone, a vendor calling, a flute testing a few notes, and the sea breathing against a harbour not far away. Wine here has become conversation's favourite accomplice. It is not only poured, it is arranged, diluted, supervised, praised, feared, joked about, and surrounded with rules that make it feel almost civilized, which is always when humans are most likely to behave strangely. In the Greek world, wine belongs to meals, festivals, sacrifices, poetry, medicine, and household life. Yet its most famous stage is the symposium, the drinking party where men recline, cups pass from hand to hand, and ideas begin to loosen their sandals. You enter a courtyard house at dusk. Lamps are being lit. Their flames tremble in shallow clay bowls, throwing honey-coloured light across plaster and painted borders. The floor feels cool beneath your feet. Cushions are arranged along low couches. A large mixing bowl, the crater, stands at the centre like a quiet authority. Wine is poured into it, then water. This matters deeply. The Greeks usually drank wine diluted, often regarding undiluted wine as reckless, barbaric, or at least a choice made by someone preparing to embarrass their family. This is a mainstream historical fact in classical Greek symposium culture. Wine was commonly mixed with water and served in a structured social setting guided by customs, conversation, music, and hierarchy. The exact ratio could vary, and everyone had opinions, because of course they did. A host or appointed leader might decide the strength of the mixture. Too weak, and the evening becomes moral instruction with snacks. Too strong, and the guests may begin debating with furniture. You watch a servant ladle the mixture into cups. The wine smells sharp, earthy, and a little resinous, not like a polished modern bottle. It may have been stored in clay amphorae sealed with pitch or resin, which can lend a pine-like scent. Your fingers curl around a kylix, a shallow cup with wide handles. It feels light, balanced, almost theatrical. You lift it carefully, because it seems designed for elegance but also for spilling if one becomes too confident. The room fills slowly. Men recline on couches, leaning on one elbow. Their garments fall in pale folds. Oil glows on their skin. Beards catch the lamplight. A boy pours wine. A musician tunes the aulos, a double reed instrument whose sound can be sweet, piercing, and slightly nasal, like a duck that has studied melody. Perfume rises from hair and wreaths. Myrtle, violets, and ivy may circle heads, because a drinking party apparently benefits from light gardening. At the heart of all this sits Dionysus, god of wine, theatre, ecstasy, masks, vines, and those alarming moments when order relaxes its grip. He is not a tidy god. He brings joy and danger together, which is precisely why he matters. Wine, in Greek imagination, is a gift that can soften grief, sharpen pleasure, and dissolve ordinary boundaries. But it can also unmake judgment. Dionysus offers release, not paperwork. Nobody invites him hoping for moderation and a balanced committee report. You move among the reclining guests as the first cups are lifted. A libation is poured, a small offering to the gods. The liquid darkens the floor or a special vessel with a soft splash. Words of prayer rise and fall. Then the drinking begins. At first, the atmosphere is measured. Someone recites poetry from memory. Someone responds with a clever line. The lyre begins, gentle and bright. Outside, the night air cools the courtyard, carrying the smell of dust, fig leaves, and distant seawater. The symposium is not merely a party. It is a school of status. Who reclines where? Who speaks? Who serves? Who performs? Who jokes? Who listens? All of it reveals rank and training. You learn how to hold a cup, when to sing, how to praise a poem, how to insult someone without starting a feud, a skill humanity still has not fully mastered. The educated guest is expected to enjoy himself without collapsing into chaos. The ideal is balanced pleasure guided by self-command. Yet the room is never as balanced as it claims. Wine does its work, voices warm, laughter grows. A guest quotes Homer with solemn grandeur, then forgets a line and coughs as if the poet himself has betrayed him. Another argues that courage is the highest virtue, while lying comfortably on cushions and accepting refills. Philosophy, poetry, flirtation, politics, and teasing blend in the lamplight. You feel the softness of woven fabric under your palm. You smell roasted fish, olives, bread, cheese, and diluted wine. The night becomes edible, drinkable, talkative. A quirky tidbit arrives in the form of a game called Cotterboss. Guests fling the dregs of wine from their cups at a target, often with hopes of displaying skill, charm, and romantic confidence. Imagine the refinement of poetry, the solemnity of divine libations, the disciplined mixing of wine and water, and then a room of grown men flicking leftovers across the space like competitive toddlers with excellent pottery. The splash, the cheers, the clatter of a target all become part of the evening's music. Cotterboss could be playful, flirtatious, and oddly prestigious. A skilled throw might be dedicated to a beloved person. The gesture says, in effect, I admire you so much that I am hurling wine sediment in your honour. Romance has worn many costumes. Some painted cups even show scenes of the game, preserving the lively absurdity of refined messiness. As you sit there, watching a droplet arc through lamplight, you understand something important about wine in Greece. It makes culture graceful, then reminds culture that it still has elbows. Historians still argue whether the symposium should be understood mainly as an aristocratic institution of elite male bonding, a wider cultural practice with many local forms, or a literary ideal polished by writers who had their own agendas. Much of what survives comes from poetry, philosophy, drama, painted pottery, and later commentary. These sources are rich, but they are not neutral windows. They are more like beautifully decorated doors, and some of them are locked. The role of women is especially complex. Citizen wives usually did not participate in the symposium as equal drinking companions, yet female musicians, dancers, servers, and hetairai could be present. Some hetairai were skilled entertainers, conversationalists, and companions. Though their lives were shaped by unequal power and social limits, you hear the music shift as a performer enters. The aulos threads through the room, bright and haunting, A dancer's bracelets whisper, perfume thickens, the gathering becomes more charged, more artful, and less respectable than it might claim at breakfast. Wine also belongs beyond private houses. You find it in festivals honouring Dionysus, where theatre grows under his sign. Tragedy and comedy bloom in the civic spaces of Athens, connected to ritual, competition, and collective attention. The audience sits under open sky, hearing stories of kings, gods, families, pride, grief, and absurd human mistakes. Wine is not simply fuel for amusement. It is part of a larger Dionysian world in which masks reveal truths and control disorder, allows the city to see itself. In ordinary religious life, wine is poured in sacrifice. It gleams on altars beside barley, incense, and animal offerings. The smell of roasting meat rises into the air. Smoke stings your eyes. Priests move with practiced seriousness. Citizens gather, talk, pray, and eat. A libation can mark beginnings, agreements, departures, meals, and remembrance. The cup becomes a gesture, a small act of connection between mortal uncertainty and divine appetite. The gods naturally receive the first taste. They have excellent legal representation in ritual matters. Greek medicine also gives wine a practical reputation. Physicians discussed wines as warming, drying, nourishing, or useful in mixtures, depending on type and patient. Wine might carry herbs, clean wounds, aid digestion, or strengthen the weak. Though one should be cautious about imagining ancient prescriptions as cozy wellness advice. A Greek doctor could be observant, intelligent, and still recommend things that would make a modern pharmacist blink slowly. Even so, wine sat close to health, diet, and the management of the body. You wander to a hillside vineyard in the morning light. The soil is stony underfoot. Cicadas rasp in waves, loud enough to feel almost visible. Vines are lower and rougher than the neat rows in a postcard fantasy. Their trunks twist like old hands. Grapes ripen under a hard sun. Farmers know the mood of slopes, winds, and seasons. Greek colonies and trade help spread vines across the Mediterranean, and different regions gain reputations for distinctive wines. Islands, coasts, and inland valleys all send their jars outward. Wine becomes local pride with handles. At a harbour, amphorae are stacked in waiting piles. Each shape can suggest origin or use to trained eyes. Clay scrapes against clay, ropes groan, sailors curse mildly at weight and weather. A merchant inspects seals. He thinks of profit, storms, taxes, and whether the buyer will complain. The wine within may be strong, sweet, resinous, or concentrated for transport. Some will be mixed at the table. Some will travel as a luxury. Some will taste better in memory than in the cup. A feature still available in many human experiences. As night returns, you sit again in the symposium room. The lamps burn lower. The crater is not as full. Conversation drifts from politics to love, from love to music, from music to whether a person can be wise while very drunk. The answer appears to be no, but the inquiry continues with enthusiasm. A guest speaks of moderation. Another snores softly into his wreath. The floor is sticky in places. Your cup is warm from your hand, cool at the lip, sour and fragrant when you drink. This Greek art of wine does not tame the drink completely. It frames it. It gives it water, music, rules, jokes, philosophy, and ritual. It teaches that pleasure can be shared, shaped, and discussed. It also admits, with a sleepy smile, that pleasure always keeps a hidden door open. In the shadow of Dionysus, every polished cup contains both conversation and escape. The final sounds of the evening settle around you, the last notes of a lyre, a servant's bare feet on the floor, a cup placed down with a soft clay click, laughter fading into the courtyard air. Above the house, stars hang over the Aegean darkness. The wine in your cup is diluted, fragrant, and alive with human voices. You drink slowly, as the Greeks insist you should, and feel the room loosen into warmth, thought, and dream. You enter Rome through heat, dust, and noise, with a city spreading around you like a living argument made of stone. Carts groan over paving slabs. Iron wheels strike sparks from the road. Vendors shout from doorways. A baker pulls flat loaves from an oven, and the smell of warm bread mixes with olive oil, sweat, smoke, urine from public corners, crushed herbs, wet laundry, and the sour breath of taverns already awake. Rome does not whisper. Rome announces itself, loudly, repeatedly, and with the confidence of a man who has never once apologized for blocking the street. Wine is everywhere here. It sits in the elite dining rooms, soldiers' packs, market stalls, rural farms, smoky bars, religious ceremonies, medical recipes, and account books. The Romans do not merely admire wine. They organize it, tax it, ship it, dilute it, criticize it, rank it, flavor it, overconsume it, and build an empire that gives the vine more roads than any grape reasonably deserves. A mainstream historical fact settles beneath your feet with the road-dust Roman expansion helped spread viticulture across Western Europe, especially into regions that would become famous winelands, including parts of Gaul, Hispania, and the Rhine frontier. You walk along a Roman road outside the city, its stones pressed hard into the earth, still holding the warmth of the sun. On either side, villas rise among fields and vineyards. The vines are trained in different ways, sometimes on stakes, sometimes between trees, sometimes in systems that look wild until you notice the method inside the mess. Leaves rasp softly in the breeze. Bees move over flowers at the margins. Workers bend under the late-season light, their tunics damp at the back, hands stained by grapes and soil. A vineyard in the Roman world is not a romantic postcard. It is labour, investment, timing, and risk. Landowners think in yields. Stewards count jars. Slaves and hired workers prune, dig, carry, press, clean, and repair. The touch of the vine is rough and living. The bark flakes under your thumb, dust clings to your ankles, the soil gives off a dry mineral smell until the press house opens and the air turns sweet, sticky, and faintly wild with crushed fruit. At the estate press, grapes arrive in baskets. Men empty them into a vat. Feet press first, then heavier equipment extracts what remains. The wooden press creaks like an old animal being asked to remember its job. Juice runs into collection basins. It foams lightly. Seeds gather in corners. Skins flatten. The first liquid may be kept separate from harsher pressings, because even in antiquity, people understand that not all parts of a grape's suffering taste the same. Clay amphorae wait in ranks. Their pointed bottoms are useful for stacking in sand, racks, and ship holds. Their necks are narrow enough to seal. Their bellies are large enough to carry a little region's ambition. You touch one and feel the baked clay's dry grain. Some are lined inside with pitch or resin. The scent rises strong and piney, mixed with fresh must and hot wood. Seals are pressed. Inscriptions or painted notes may mark origin, contents, trader, or destination. Rome loves records almost as much as it loves conquest, which is saying something. You follow the amphorae to a river barge, then to a port where cranes, ropes, and shoulders move goods in a kind of muscular choreography. The dock smells of salt, fish, tar, wet rope, old wood, and spilled wine. Amphorae clink together with hollow ceramic knocks. Merchants haggle. Sailors swear by gods they may or may not respect. A clerk scratches figures onto a tablet, because even a glorious empire must eventually ask who paid for transport. Wine flows along the empire's arteries. It moves by road, river, and sea, Italian wine travels outward, provincial wine travels inward. Local vineyards grow near military settlements and towns. Veterans receive land and sometimes plant vines. Colonies take Roman tastes with them, then adapt those tastes to new weather and soils. What begins as demand becomes production. What begins as imported habit becomes local identity. The vine follows power, then quietly outlives it. In the city, you enter a taberna, a common shop or bar opening onto the street. The counter is worn smooth by elbows. Large jars sit embedded in masonry, their mouths dark and cool. The air smells of cheap wine, lentils, garlic, stale smoke, wool cloaks, and rain trapped in sandals. Men stand shoulder to shoulder. A woman laughs from the doorway. A gambler slaps a table. Someone complains about prices with the intense sorrow of a person who has never farmed grapes, but is deeply offended by the cost of them. Here wine is ordinary, not always elegant. It may be watered, spiced, warmed, sweetened, sour, sharp, or suspiciously improved by the seller's imagination. Poorer Romans drink cheaper versions, sometimes made from later pressings or watered heavily. Elite writers often sneer at low-quality wine, which tells you two things: bad wine existed, and rich people were already very comfortable being dramatic about it. The cup you receive is rough, maybe ceramic, maybe metal. Its rim is uneven. The wine bites first, then warms. It is not delicate, but it does the job, and Rome respects a thing that performs. The army has its own relationship with wine. Soldiers receive rations that may include wine or vinegar-like drink, useful for morale, calories, and safe for hydration when mixed with water. Imagine a camp near a frontier river. Leather creaks, armour rings softly, smoke drifts low over tents, a pot boils with beans and grain. Men clean weapons, patch sandals, and mutter about officers, weather, and pay. Humanity's three eternal military topics. A cup passes from hand to hand. It is sour, watered, and welcome. The empire is not held together by wine alone, but wine certainly helps everyone complain in rhythm. In elite dining rooms, the atmosphere changes again. You recline in a villa where mosaic floors are cool under bare feet, and painted walls glow with red, black, and gold. Lamps burn perfumed oil. Slaves move quietly between couches. Platters arrive with fish, olives, eggs, dormice in certain fashionable circles, sauces, fruit, and sweets. The wine is mixed in careful proportions, poured by attendants, and discussed by guests who have decided that a cup is not truly enjoyable unless it can also support an opinion. Famous wines carry prestige. Falernian, grown in Campania, becomes legendary among Roman elites. Literary sources praise it as powerful, age-worthy, and expensive. Certain vintages gain almost mythic status. One quirky tidbit is the famous Opimian wine, linked to the consulship of 121 BCE, remembered by Roman writers as an extraordinary vintage. Stories claimed bottles or jars of it survived for astonishing lengths of time, though one suspects that drinking extremely ancient wine may have involved more ceremony than pleasure. There is confidence, and then there is sipping something old enough to have political memories. Roman taste can be startling. Wines might be flavoured with herbs, spices, honey, resin, seawater, or concentrated grape syrup. Some sweetening practices involved boiling grape must down into thick syrups such as defrutum or sapa. A darker curiosity sits here. Such syrups were sometimes prepared in lead vessels, and some scholars have explored whether lead contamination affected Roman health. The idea has often attracted dramatic claims, as if the entire empire stumbled because dessert wine had poor kitchen supervision. Reality is more cautious, but the detail remains wonderfully strange. Scholars continue to debate how much wine the average Roman consumed day by day, because surviving evidence is uneven and often filtered through elite texts. legal documents, archaeological finds, and idealized complaints. Estimates vary depending on class, region, age, gender, urban access, and whether one counts heavily diluted drink. Rome leaves mountains of traces, but not always the exact answer you want. History behaves like a host who pours generously, then hides the label. Religious life also keeps wine close. Libations are poured to gods, household spirits, and the dead. At a domestic shrine, you see a small offering made in a corner of the home. The room is quiet. A flame trembles. A few drops fall from a cup with soft taps, darkening the surface below. The gesture is intimate, almost tender. In public rituals, wine joins incense, prayers, animals, garlands, and civic display. A city that governs millions still bends toward the old habit of pouring liquid for unseen powers. You wander through Pompeii, where taverns, vineyards, dining rooms, and wall paintings preserve the texture of Roman wine culture with eerie clarity. The streets are narrow. Stepping stones lift your feet above old runoff channels. Frescoes show vines, cups, banquets, and gods. Shops open toward the road. In one painted scene, customers argue over service, proving that no eruption, empire, or sacred tradition can erase the ancient drama of people being difficult in bars. The countryside around such towns reveals another layer. Wine is business. Landowners calculate a profit against grain, olives, livestock, and labour. Agricultural writers give advice on vine planting, pruning, pressing, storage, and estate management. Their tone can be practical, stern, and confident, as if vines are disobedient employees who would improve if they read more instructions. You walk past a steward inspecting jars, his face serious. A leaking amphora is not romance, it is lost money. In provinces, local tastes reshape Roman habits. In Gaul, amphorae pile up in archaeological deposits, signs of massive importation and later local production. In Hispania, vineyards flourish under Roman systems of agriculture and trade. Along rivers, wine reaches frontier settlements and market towns. The drink becomes a Roman signal, but also something provincial communities make their own. A cup in a distant town may carry imperial fashion, local soil, and a tavern keeper's personal decision to stretch the supply with water. Culture spreads grandly, then gets negotiated at the counter. By late afternoon, you stand beside a warehouse near the Tiber. The river is brown and busy. Barges drift between quays. Porters strain under loads. The sun flashes on water, then disappears behind stacked goods. The whole city smells warm, human, and endlessly active. Amphorae from many places rest in heaps and rows, some empty, some sealed, some broken into sherds that will become part of the city's ground. Rome consumes so much that even its trash becomes landscape. You lift a cup as evening thickens round you. Wine exists in every social register. It is cheap comfort and elite performance, army ration and sacred offering, medicine, commodity, tax object, farm product, dinner companion, and literary obsession. It travels farther because roads exist. Roads exist because empire demands movement. Empire demands movement because Rome is hungry for grain, oil, soldiers, taxes, luxury, and control. Wine slips into all of that, not as decoration, but as a daily technology of belonging. The cup is cool now, the city's noise lowers but never vanishes. A dog barks, a cart rattles, a singer tries a line in the distance and abandons it wisely. You taste watered wine, slightly rough, slightly sweet, with a resin shadow at the edge. It carries sunlit slopes, pressed fruit, clay jars, river barges, soldiers' camps, shop counters, villa couches, and small offerings at household shrines. Rome has taken the vine and given it roads, markets, law, appetite, and scale. The night settles over tiled roofs and crowded streets. Lamps appear one by one in the dark bellis of amphorae. Wine waits to be poured, sold, praised, watered, taxed, spilled, and remembered. The empire is vast, restless, and very sure of itself. The cup in your hand is modest, but it knows the way through every gate. You enter a monastery in the blue hush before sunrise, when the world feels unpolished and half asleep. Stone walls hold the night's cold. The flagstones press their chill through the soles of your shoes. Somewhere in the dark, a bell begins to ring, slow and plain, each note moving through corridors like a hand smoothing linen. The sound is not dramatic. It is steady, patient, and impossible to argue with, which is very much the monastic style. The air smells of wax, damp wool, ashes, old parchment, and the faint sour sweetness of wine resting in barrels below. Outside, vines cling to a slope silvered with mist. Their bare winter canes look like handwriting scratched across the earth. In warmer months, leaves will spread and grapes will swell, but now the vineyard sleeps under frost, while the monks rise for prayer as if sleep were a negotiable arrangement. Here wine takes on a quieter authority. It is no longer only a drink of feasts, trade, and clever conversation. It becomes part of discipline, worship, hospitality, agriculture, medicine, and the calendar of a community that measures life by bells. The monastery is not outside the world. It is a small, organized island inside it, with rules, chores, books, kitchens, gardens, workshops, and a deep concern for keeping everyone reasonably busy so they do not start developing opinions. A mainstream historical fact settles into the cool morning air medieval monasteries. Especially Benedictine and Cistercian houses played an important role in preserving vineyards, managing estates, recording agricultural practice, and improving wine production in regions such as Burgundy, the Rhine, and other parts of Europe. Monks needed wine for the Eucharist, for guests, for daily allowance in many communities, and for trade or rent. Their devotion may have pointed upward, but their hands were very much in the soil. You follow the monks into the church. The space is dim, filled with breath and stone. Candles tremble near the altar. Voices begin to chant in Latin, low and even, not hurried, not decorative, more like water moving beneath ice. The sound gathers in the arches and returns softened. You do not need to understand every word to feel the shape of it. The chant makes time slow down, which is convenient, because monastery time has many duties and very little interest in your personal preferences. On the altar, wine waits in a vessel. In Christian ritual, wine becomes sacred through the Eucharist, joined to memory, sacrifice, and presence. Its use is not optional decoration. It is central to the liturgical life of the community. That need gives the vine a protected place in monastic lands. A vineyard can be practical and holy at once. The same grape that stains a worker's fingers may become part of the most solemn act the monastery performs. It is hard to neglect a plant that has appointments with God. After prayer, you move into the open air. Frost lies in the grass, crisp underfoot. A monk walks ahead of you with pruning tools in hand. His robe brushes against vine posts. He bends close to the plant, examining old wood and new growth. Pruning is an art of removal. Too much growth weakens the fruit. Too little risks the harvest. The blade makes a small clean click as it cuts. The vine shivers slightly. Sap will rise when the season turns. For now, the work is quiet, almost surgical, though with fewer compliments from the patient. You touch a pruned cane. It is dry, ridged, and cold. The monk does not speak much. Monastic life values silence. though silence in a vineyard is never empty. You hear crows in a field, water dripping from a roof, distant hooves on a lane, and the soft scrape of tools. The atmosphere is one of attention. Every row must be walked, every plant must be seen. The vineyard teaches humility in a way sermons can only attempt. Weather, mildew, frost, birds, insects, and human error all have voting rights. In the scriptorium, another kind of tending continues. The room smells of ink, scraped parchment, dust, and a small charcoal brazier fighting heroically against the cold. A monk copies a text with careful strokes. Margins wait for decoration or correction. Estate accounts may record quantities of wine owed, stored, sold, or consumed. Charters and cartularies preserve gifts of land, including vineyards. Rules and customs shape how much wine a monk may receive, how guests are served, and how cellars are supervised. Civilization, once again, proves its seriousness by writing down who gets a drink. The cellarer becomes a figure of quiet power. He manages stores of bread, ale, wine, cheese, oil, salt fish, vegetables, and tools. He must be honest, organised, and calm, which is a lot to ask of someone responsible for both monks and barrels. You descend with him into the cellar. The steps are worn in the middle. The air grows cooler and wetter. Your hand touches the stone wall, slick with faint moisture. Barrels rest in rows, swelling slightly in the damp. The smell is deep oak, yeast, sour lees, earth, smoke, and old fruit. A candle throws gold light onto the barrel heads. The cellarer listens, sniffs, tastes, judges. Wine can spoil. Barrels can leak. Mice can arrive with disrespectful confidence. Servants may steal. Guests may drink more than holiness strictly requires. This cellar is a spiritual test disguised as storage. A small cup is filled from a barrel. You taste carefully. The wine is cloudy by modern standards, perhaps sharper, less polished, and alive with the cellar's mood. It warms your mouth and then your chest. The monk nods, not with delight, exactly, but with professional relief. Researchers still disagree over how much medieval monastic wine quality came from deliberate experimentation, how much from inherited local practice, and how much from the simple advantage of stable institutions holding land across generations. It is tempting to imagine monks patiently inventing fine wine in a heroic beam of candlelight. The truth is broader and more interesting. They observed, repeated, remembered, failed, adapted, and endured. That is less cinematic than genius, but much more useful. The Cistercians offer a particularly vivid example of this patient discipline. Their houses often favoured careful land management, drainage, granges, labour organisation, and close observation of fields and vines. In Burgundy, monastic communities helped identify and maintain distinct vineyard sites, noticing how slope, exposure, soil, and drainage changed the character of wine. They did not use modern chemistry, but they possessed eyes, tongues, and notebooks, and centuries, a combination that should not be underestimated unless you enjoy being outsmarted by someone with a hoe and a salter. You walk along a Burgundian slope in spring, and the mist has lifted, the earth smells fresh and dark. Small green shoots unfold from the vines like hesitant thoughts. Stone walls divide plots, holding heat, marking ownership, shaping labour. The sun touches one patch earlier than another. A lower strip remains damp. A higher terrace dries quickly. You can feel how land has moods. Some vines stand in thin, stony soil. Others root in a heavier ground. The monks notice these differences because their survival depends on noticing things other people dismiss as scenery. A quirky tidbit lives among these stones. Medieval people sometimes treated saints connected with vineyards almost like local weather officials. In parts of Europe, statues or images of vineyard saints could be honoured in gratitude for protection, then scolded, turned around, or otherwise humiliated if hail, frost, or poor harvests arrived. It sounds rude, but also emotionally honest. When your year's labour can be destroyed by a cold night, even a holy statue may receive a performance review. The monastery table is plain but not joyless. You sit on a bench in the refectory as daylight thins beyond high windows. A reader's voice moves steadily through the room while the brothers eat in silence. Wooden bowls, coarse bread, beans, onions, cheese, and sometimes fish or eggs appear according to season and rule. Wine may be served in measured portions, often diluted or controlled. The cup is not supposed to become entertainment. It is nourishment, ritual allowance, medicine, and mercy. Still, you suspect some brothers quietly prefer days when the measure is generous. Sanctity has taste buds. Hospitality gives wine another role. Travellers, pilgrims, messengers, nobles, and the poor may come to the gate. The guest house smells of straw mattresses, wet cloaks, leather bags, and stew. A cup of wine can welcome, restore, and signal safety. In a world of difficult roads and uncertain inns, monastic hospitality matters. A weary traveller receives bread and drink, hears the bell, feels the warmth of a fire, and perhaps decides the world is not entirely hostile. Wine becomes part of charity, though carefully managed charity, because even compassion has a pantry. Medicine, too, keeps wine close. Monastic infirmaries may use wine as a carrier for herbs, a tonic for the weak, or a cleaner for wounds and instruments, depending on local knowledge and inherited texts. The herb garden outside the infirmary smells of sage, rue, fennel, mint, and damp soil. Bees worry at blossoms. A brother gathers leaves into a basket. Wine draws out flavours, preserves mixtures, and makes bitter remedies slightly more persuasive. Many patients throughout history have accepted medicine more calmly when it arrives with a cup attached. This is not advanced psychology. It is just realistic. Yet the monastery is not a dreamy vineyard retreat. It is bound to labour, hierarchy, rents, disputes, and sometimes impressive ambition. Monastic houses can be wealthy landholders. They negotiate with lords, peasants, towns, bishops, and rival abbeys. Vineyard ownership means income, influence, and legal conflict. Boundaries matter. Tithes matter. A row of vines can become a lawsuit with leaves. The peaceful landscape hides a paper trail of claims, gifts, confirmations, and quarrels. Humans can make even grapes argumentative. Autumn brings the monastery to a fuller pulse. The harvest begins under a sky washed clean by cool light. Bells call, carts creak, baskets fill. Grapes are clipped and carried. Wasps hover drunkenly around broken skins. The smell of ripe fruit thickens the air, sweet and dusty. Hands grow sticky. Robes are hitched up for work with limited elegance. Lay brothers, hired labourers, tenants, and monks move through the rows. The quiet community becomes busy, almost festive, though no one would describe it as a party unless they had a very low threshold for excitement. In the press house, the grapes surrender. Juice runs dark into tubs. The floor is slick. The wooden beams groan under pressure. Steam rises from tired bodies in the cool air. Someone laughs softly when a basket tips awkwardly. Someone mutters a prayer for a stubborn press screw. Work and worship lean into each other until they are hard to separate. The vintage becomes a year made liquid, holding spring frost, summer heat, August storms, human labour, and the strange kindness of a plant that prefers difficult slopes. Night returns to the monastery. The last light leaves the vineyard. In the cellar, barrels settle with tiny ticks and sighs. Fermentation murmurs faintly, a hidden breathing inside wood. You stand in the cool dark and feel how monastic wine is guarded not by secrecy, but by repetition, prayer, pruning, copying, measuring, tasting, serving, storing, trading, and beginning again. The monks do not turn wine into civilization by glamour. They do it by keeping habits alive when the world outside the cloister feels uncertain, loud, hungry, and frequently badly organized. You lift a small cup in the cellar's candle glow. The wine is modest, earthy, and a little sharp, but it carries discipline. It tastes of bells in darkness, frost on vines, ink on fingers, stone under palm, and the patient intelligence of people who believe that ordinary labour can touch eternity. Above you, the church waits for another office of prayer. Outside, the vineyard sleeps under stars. Inside the barrel, the year continues its slow transformation. Unseen and quietly faithful, you enter a medieval town at the hour when shutters open. Carts begin to roll, and the street decides it belongs to everyone at once. The lane is narrow, paved in patches, muddy in others, with timber-framed houses leaning toward each other as if exchanging gossip above your head. A sign creaks in the morning wind. A pig noses along the gutter with professional confidence. Church bells sound across roofs, joined by hammering, hoofbeats, barking dogs, sellers calling prices, and someone loudly accusing someone else of cheating over onions. The air is crowded with smells: fresh bread, damp straw, horse sweat, smoke from charcoal braziers, leather from a shoemaker's stall, fish from the market, making no effort to be subtle, and beneath it all, from dark doorways and low cellars, comes the sour fruity scent of wine being drawn, spilled, warmed, watered, and sold. This is not the quiet discipline of cloisters or the polished ease of noble halls. This is town wine, noisy, public, taxable, suspicious, comforting, and very good at starting conversations nobody asked for. You pause outside a tavern. Its sign is painted with a bunch of grapes, a saint, a barrel, or perhaps a symbol only the locals understand after 2 cups. The doorway is low, so you bend slightly to enter. Inside, the room is dim even in daylight. Smoke drifts near the rafters. Rushes on the floor hold the smells of spilled drink, boots, herbs, and yesterday's decisions. Benches are rough beneath your hands. A barrel sits behind the counter with a wooden tap. Cups hang from pegs. Dice click on a table. A woman with sleeves rolled high measures wine into a jug while watching every customer as if each one has personally disappointed her in advance. In medieval European towns, taverns and wine shops became central social spaces, especially where wine was locally produced or easily imported. They served travellers, labourers, merchants, craftsmen, students, clerks, pilgrims, and respectable people who planned to remain respectable for approximately 1 cup. Wine was sold in many ways by the pitcher, by the cup, by the barrel, in private cellars, at market stalls, and in regulated houses. Town life gave wine a new stage. It became less about estate identity and more about access, price, credit, argument, and ordinance. A mainstream historical fact sits squarely in this smoky room. Medieval authorities often regulated the sale of wine through taxes, price controls, quality rules, licensing, and measures, because wine brought revenue and also caused trouble if left entirely to human enthusiasm. Kings, bishops, lords, and town councils all found ways to collect money from the trade. Duties at gates, tolls at bridges, market fees, import taxes, and retail licenses could all attach themselves to a cask before anyone even tasted it. Wine was liquid pleasure, yes, but also liquid paperwork. Very medieval, very on brand. You watch a town officer enter with measuring rods and a face built for suspicion. He inspects a jug, checks the volume, glances at the barrel, and asks questions in the flat tone of a man who has heard every excuse since Pentecost. The tavern keeper smiles politely, which is how war begins in small rooms. Measures matter. A short pour cheats the customer. A watered wine cheats both customer and tax collector. A mislabeled vintage insults public order, which in a medieval town is already balancing on one tired donkey. The wine itself varies enormously. Some is local, fresh, pale, and sharp. Some is imported in heavy casks from famed regions. Some is sweetened, spiced, heated, or blended. Some is respectable. Some taste like a barrel once dreamed of fruit and then lost interest. You lift a cup. The rim is thick and slightly chipped. The liquid smells acidic, earthy, perhaps a little smoky from storage. It touches your tongue with brightness. Then a rough edge. It is not elegant, but the room accepts it. Nobody here is searching for delicate notes of violets. They are searching for warmth, company, courage, relief, and perhaps an excuse to avoid going back to work. Outside, the market swells. Wine arrives by cart in barrels secured with ropes. Wheels sink into mud. Teamsters shout at horses. Coopers inspect hoops, tapping wood with mallets. Merchants argue near weighing beams. A clerk marks accounts on a wax tablet or parchment roll. The barrel is a miracle of utility, strong enough to roll, large enough to store, and awkward enough to remind everyone that commerce is mostly controlled inconvenience. Touch the wood and you feel damp grain, iron bands, and a faint sticky trace where wine has seeped. The wine trade binds towns to countryside and distant ports. In England, imported wines from Gascony became deeply important across the Middle Ages, especially under the Plantagenet connection to southwestern France. Barrels moved through Bordeaux and across the Channel, then into London, Bristol, and other towns. In northern Europe, where grapes struggled in many climates, imported wine carried prestige and profit. In wine-growing regions, towns depended on surrounding vineyards, local harvests, and seasonal flows of labour. A cup in a tavern might contain local hillside weather or the politics of a sea route. Not bad for something served beside a stew with questionable turnips. You walk toward the town gate, where officials collect tolls. The gatehouse smells of cold stone, wet rope, animal hide, and smoke. A line of carts waits. Drivers slap their arms against the chill. A guard peers into loads. The tax on wine can be a serious matter because town finances are never as romantic as town skylines. Walls need repairing. Watchmen need paying. Bridges collapse unless money persuades them otherwise. Wine helps fund civic life, and civic life helps protect wine merchants. It is a cosy arrangement, provided you enjoy being charged at every boundary. Inside the walls, guilds and merchant groups shape trade. Vintners may organize, negotiate privileges, and defend their interests. In some towns, official tasters or appointed inspectors examine wine quality. You can imagine them entering a cellar with solemn importance, as if judging souls at the last day, except with cups. They sniff, sip, compare, and declare whether a barrel may be sold. The task is practical, but also deeply human. Give someone authority over flavour, and they will eventually develop an expression. Medievalists still argue over how much tavern culture encouraged disorder compared with how much it simply made ordinary sociability visible to authorities who preferred silence, obedience, and early bedtimes. Court records mention fights, debts, gambling, insults, and illegal sales. But such records naturally preserve trouble more faithfully than peaceful evenings. 1,000 quiet cups leave little evidence. One man shouting at a baker while wearing someone else's hat may end up immortalized in legal memory. History has a talent for saving the awkward parts. The tavern is also a place of news. You sit near a table where a travelling peddler tells of a poor harvest, a new tax, a noble wedding, a shipwreck, a saint's feast, a war rumour, and a monstrous fish seen near a bridge. The listeners lean in, cups pause halfway to mouths. Information moves with wine because people loosen when they drink, and because taverns gather strangers who carry distant fragments. Some stories are true, some are improved, some have been improved so thoroughly they should be given new parents. A quirky tidbit appears during festivals and civic celebrations. In some medieval and early modern towns, public conduits or fountains could run with wine during royal entries, coronations, or major festivities. Imagine a crowd pressing into a square as officials arrange a display of generosity. Wine flows where water usually runs. People cheer, cups, bowls, hats, and probably a few extremely optimistic shoes appear. It is political theatre made drinkable. The ruler says, "See how abundant and gracious I am." The crowd says, "Absolutely. And also, please keep pouring." But wine in town can turn suspiciously sacred as well. You pass a small chapel near a busy crossing where candles flicker before an image of a local saint. A woman whispers that a spilled cup once cured a fever. A man swears that wine used in a feast did not empty for 3 days, although his cousin was counting, and his cousin is very reliable except when he is not. Miracle stories involving wine, abundance, transformation, or healing circulated in Christian culture, often tied to saints, shrines, or local memory. Some were accepted with devotion, some questioned, and some probably helped a nearby tavern enjoy a very successful season. The boundary between faith and commerce can be thin enough to sip through. Pilgrims need drink. Feast days bring crowds. Crowds bring sellers. Sellers bring prices that mysteriously rise in the presence of holiness. You hear bells, chanting, laughter, and bargaining all at once. The smell of incense meets roasted meat and open barrels. A holy day in town is prayer braided with appetite. People kneel, then eat, then drink, then buy ribbons, then argue about lodging. Humans approach eternity with very practical stomachs. At midday, workers come in from shops and building sites. A mason's hands are white with lime dust. A weaver's fingers are rough from thread. A carter's shoulders sag under old strain. The tavern gives them a place to sit, even briefly. You feel the warmth of bodies in the room and the damp wool smell rising from cloaks. A bowl of pottage arrives. Bread is torn. Wine is poured, sometimes diluted, sometimes not. For people living in crowded towns, such spaces offer release from household walls, workshop discipline, and the watchful eyes of neighbours. Although, to be fair, the neighbours are probably sitting one bench away. Women appear throughout this world, not only as drinkers, but as sellers, brewers, innkeepers, widows managing businesses, servants, and labourers tied to the trade. Records in many places show women involved in retail drink economies, though legal status and local custom shaped what they could own, sell, or defend. You see a widow behind the counter calculating credit in her head faster than a clerk with ink. She knows who pays, who delays, who lies beautifully, and who should not be served strong wine near dice. Her tavern is not chaos. It is management under smoke. Evening lowers over the town, lanterns appear. The street outside grows slick with mist. A watchman passes, staff in hand, calling the hour. In the tavern, the tone changes. Day labour becomes night talk. Songs begin softly, then louder. A fiddle scrapes. Someone keeps rhythm by tapping a cup. A student in a stained robe quotes Latin to impress a person who does not care. 2 merchants bend over accounts, their voices tight. A pilgrim sleeps with his head on folded arms. The fire pops, sending sparks into the smoky dimness. You understand now why authorities feared and needed these places. Taverns collect thirst, rumour, credit, politics, loneliness, celebration, and resentment under one roof. They sell comfort by the measure. They convert grapes into revenue, stories, friendships, debts, and occasional bruises. They make the town audible to itself. The wine cup passes through hands that rarely appear in royal chronicles: porters, seamstresses, apprentices, sailors, widows, masons, clerks, cooks, carters, and travellers whose names vanish with the road dust. Near closing, the tavern keeper wipes the counter with a cloth darkened by use. Barrels settle in the corner. The floor is sticky underfoot. Outside, rain begins, soft at first, then steadier, ticking on shutters and running from eaves. The town smells cleaner for a moment, though only a moment. You step beneath the doorway and feel cool night air touch your face. Behind you, cups clink one last time. Ahead, the church tower stands black against the cloudy sky. Wine in the medieval town is not quiet, not pure, not always noble. It is civic. It pays tolls, fills cups, funds walls, tempts officials, blesses feast days, irritates moralists, nourishes rumours, and gives ordinary people a room where the day can loosen its grip. You hold its taste a little longer on your tongue, sharp and warming, while the rain softens the street and the tavern sign creaks gently above you. You arrive at a royal court in the late afternoon, when candlelight begins to compete with the last clean brightness from tall windows. The floors are polished enough to reflect shoes, hems, and ambition. Tapestries hang thickly on the stone walls, softening draughts and displaying hunts, saints, battles, vines, and family pride in thread so expensive it seems almost rude to touch. The air smells of beeswax, roasted meats, wet wool steaming near the fire, crushed rushes, perfume, and wine opened for people who expect the world to notice their thirst. You stand near a long table laid with linen, silver cups, carved trenchers, and glass vessels that catch the light like small frozen ponds. Servants move quickly without appearing to hurry. Their shoes make careful whispers. A lute sounds from the far end of the hall, gentle and slightly lost beneath conversation. A nobleman lifts a cup, sniffs it, and nods with the grave expression of someone evaluating destiny rather than fermented grapes. Fine taste has entered the room, wearing velvet. Wine now carries rank in a more elaborate way. Kings, dukes, bishops, wealthy merchants, and city elites do not merely drink what is available. They compare origins, praise certain regions, condemn others, collect reputations, and build identities around preference. A cup can suggest refinement, loyalty, education, travel, money, and proximity to power. This is a mainstream historical fact. During the later medieval and early modern periods, European wines became increasingly associated with named regions, courtly taste, long-distance trade, and status, helping shape reputations that still cling to places such as Bordeaux, Burgundy, the Rhine, Tokay, Port Country, and Champagne. You follow a servant carrying a jug through the hall. The jug is cool beneath his palm, damp with condensation from a cellar. The wine inside is not just drink. It is a diplomatic instrument. A favoured bottle can flatter an ambassador. A rare cask can honour a bridegroom. A sweet imported wine can announce that the host has both excellent contacts and no fear of customs duties. One person praises the brightness of a Rhine wine. Another prefers deep red claret from Gascony or Bordeaux. Someone else makes a face at a local vintage with the theatrical pain of a man betrayed by geography. Courts create fashion, and fashion travels faster than common sense. When rulers and aristocrats favour certain wines, merchants respond. Ships, carts, river barges, and pack animals carry barrels toward palaces and great houses. Towns that can provide desirable wine gain wealth. Regions begin to guard their names, their methods, their privileges, and sometimes their myths. The table becomes a map of influence. You can taste alliances in one cup, trade routes in another, climate in a third, and taxation in all of them. Naturally, because governments are very loyal to beverages. Outside the court, vineyards spread across slopes shaped by weather, you walk through a cool northern hillside where mist hangs in the folds of the land. The grass is wet against your ankles. The vines stand in disciplined rows, their leaves trembling under a breeze that smells of river water, clay, and distant wood smoke. Church bells sound from a village below. A cart creaks along a track. In the soil, your fingers find small stones warmed earlier by the sun. Every little detail matters here: slope, drainage, exposure, wind, frost pocket, soil depth, and the mood of the season, which rarely fills out its intentions in advance. Climate begins to write itself into taste. Europe passes through periods of relative warmth and cooling, shifting harvest dates, ripeness, yields, and the regions where grapes can thrive. The so-called medieval warm period helped viticulture expand in some northern areas, while later cooler phases, including conditions associated with the Little Ice Age, made ripening less reliable in many places. Do not imagine one simple line on a chart. Weather is not a tidy clock. It behaves more like a musician improvising during tax season. You stand in a vineyard after a spring frost. The atmosphere is painfully still. Buds that promised leaves now hang blackened and limp. A farmer rubs one between finger and thumb, and it crumbles softly. The smell is cold, green, and faintly bitter. No battle trumpet sounds. No king arrives. Yet this small injury may decide the income of families. Rents owed to landlords, prices in town, and what gets poured at tables months later. Fine taste, for all its elegance, depends on very fragile beginnings. In a warmer year, the same slope feels generous. Bees work in the margins, grapes soften under a clean sun. The skins grow taut and dusty with bloom. When you pinch one, juice pearls out, sweet against your fingertip. Pickers talk as they move through the rows, baskets thumping against hips. The air fills with leaves, sweat, fruit, and the dry scent of cut stems. The land seems to cooperate. People become optimistic, which is charming and historically dangerous. Courtly wine fashion also depends on preservation and transport. Some wines travel better than others, stronger, sweeter, fortified, or carefully handled wines can survive distance with more dignity. Barrels crossing seas may change character along the way. Merchants learn what can endure a voyage, what must be drunk young, what should be sweetened, what can be blended, and what buyers will believe if the story is confident enough. The history of taste is never innocent. It contains weather, skill, money, and marketing wearing a respectable hat. A quirky tidbit glows in the candlelight around royal wine fountains and ceremonial excess at certain grand entries, weddings, coronations, and civic celebrations. Wine might be distributed publicly in spectacular displays, sometimes through fountains, conduits, or temporary structures designed to show abundance. In theory, this expressed generosity and divine favour. In practice, it also created a crowd of people rushing toward free alcohol with cups, bowls, hats, and the calm dignity for which crowds are famous. Power loved symbolism, the public loved not paying. You move into a merchant's counting room near a port. The space smells of salt, paper, wool bales, ink, damp wood, and wine leaking faintly from a nearby cask. Ledgers lie open on a table. A clerk's quill scratches with dry persistence. Barrels are marked by origin, owner, and destination. The merchant thinks in seasons and risks storms, piracy, spoiled cargo, changing tariffs, royal demands, war, debt, and whether a court has suddenly decided another region tastes more fashionable this year. A noble palate can ruin a business plan by becoming bored. Glass changes the experience of wine among the wealthy, where earlier storage often depended on amphorae, barrels, and jugs. Finer glassware gradually becomes more desirable at elite tables. Clearer vessels allow drinkers to admire colour and brightness. The cup becomes part of taste. You lift a delicate glass and feel how thin the rim is against your lip. It makes you drink differently, more slowly, more self-consciously. Wine is becoming performance not only in what it is, but how it appears. The liquid catches candlelight, ruby or amber or pale gold. People notice. People comment. People pretend their comments are spontaneous. Historians still argue whether the rise of refined wine culture was driven more by genuine sensory appreciation, by elite competition, by expanding trade, by medical ideas about diet and temperament, or by state power shaping markets through privilege and taxation. The safest answer is that all these forces intertwined. Taste is personal when it reaches the tongue, but social long before it arrives there. You may prefer one wine because it pleases you. You may also prefer it because everyone important has agreed that preferring it is evidence you're not hopeless. Medical theory still influences choices. Wines are described as hot, cold, dry, moist, nourishing, thinning, strengthening, or dangerous for certain bodies and seasons. A court physician might recommend one wine for digestion, another for weakness, another to avoid in summer, and another for an elderly lord whose humours apparently require careful negotiation. At dinner, this gives noble guests another reason to sound informed. One may refuse a cup not because it tastes bad, but because it is unsuitable to the complexion. Very elegant. Very convenient. Regional identity strengthens as landscapes become famous. In Burgundy, small differences between vineyard sites gain increasing attention. In Bordeaux, connections to English and northern markets help support a huge export trade. Along the Rhine, steep vineyards produce pale, bright wines prized far beyond their valleys. In Hungary, the sweet wines of Tokaji later become celebrated among European elites, wrapped in stories of nobility, botrytis, and golden luxury. In Iberia, wine regions grow through maritime connections and local traditions, serving both domestic tables and distant buyers. You stand above a river vineyard at twilight. The slope falls sharply below you, and the water reflects the sky in strips of silver. Workers finish tying vines. Their fingers are red from cold. A church tower rises from the village, and smoke lifts straight from chimneys. The atmosphere is quiet, but not empty. It is filled with expectation. In such places, wine becomes not merely product, but belonging. A village learns the flavour of its hill. A family inherits rows of vines and also worries, skills, debts, and pride. A region slowly becomes a name that can travel farther than its people. Kings and princes understand this power. They grant monopolies, privileges, exemptions, and protections. They claim certain supplies for their households. They regulate taverns, imports, exports, and duties. Wine may be used in diplomacy, rewards, religious foundations, and ceremonies of loyalty. A royal cellar is a treasury of taste. Within it, casks and bottles rest in cool darkness, watched by officials who know that a spoiled supply is not only wasteful, but politically embarrassing. No one wants to explain to a duke that the wedding wine has turned mean. You descend into such a cellar. The air is cool and heavy, damp enough to settle on your skin. Candles throw low light across curved barrels and stone vaulting. Drips fall somewhere in the dark with slow, hollow notes. The smell is intoxicating even before the cup oak. Mould, fruit, lees, earth, old straw, and a mineral chill. You place a hand on a barrel. It feels swollen and alive, a wooden animal breathing through seams, Above, the court dances, negotiates, envies, and smiles with knives hidden in words. Below, the wine waits without concern for etiquette. Taste becomes a language of distinction. A ruler who serves rare wine appears generous. A guest who recognizes it appears educated. A merchant who supplies it appears useful. A region whose wine is praised gains leverage. A poor vintage humbles everyone. Weather remains the quiet sovereign behind the visible ones, touching grapes more directly than any crown. Court fashion can command ships, but it cannot command sun. The feast continues, musicians play, dogs sleep under benches hoping for bones, servants refill cups with swift precision. A queen speaks softly to an ambassador. A bishop studies his glass. A young noble boasts of a wine he claims to have tasted in a distant city, though his description suggests he mostly tasted the desire to sound travelled. Candle smoke gathers beneath the ceiling. The room grows warmer, louder, more fragrant, more dangerous in the gentle way of rooms where people drink and plan. You lift your cup again and sense how far wine has travelled socially. It belongs to soil and weather, yet it also belongs to manners, law, ceremony, and reputation. It can make a cold northern slope famous. It can turn a merchant rich or nervous. It can help a king perform magnificence. It can teach a court to speak of refinement while depending on farmers whose names will never be toasted in the hall. Outside, night covers the vineyards, frost may come or rain, or a mild wind from the west. No courtier can know. The vines stand in darkness, quiet and exposed, carrying within themselves the next argument over quality, the next tax, the next fashion, the next cup raised beneath painted ceilings. You feel the smooth glass between your fingers and the soft warmth of wine in your chest. Taste has become history's velvet glove, but beneath it, the land still holds the hand. You step into a workshop where firelight glows orange against dark beams, and the air is hot enough to make your face prickle. A furnace breathes at the centre of the room. Its mouth opens and closes with a red animal glare. Men move around it with metal rods, wet cloths, wooden paddles, and the calm focus of people handling molten glass, which is to say, people who have made peace with danger but still prefer keeping all their fingers. The smell is sharp and mineral mixed with ash, sweat, damp straw, and the faint sweetness of wine stored nearby. You hear the deep roar of flame, the clink of tools, the soft hiss when hot glass meets a cooled surface. A glowing gather of glass turns at the end of a blowpipe, sagging like honey made of light. The glassmaker lifts the pipe, breathes steadily, and the glowing bubble swells. It is fragile, beautiful, and slightly terrifying. Humans have always enjoyed taking sand, fire, and ambition, then asking them to behave. Wine is changing its clothing. For centuries, as barrels, as jars, skins, and ceramic vessels have carried and stored it. Now glass bottles grow more important, especially as European glassmaking improves and stronger bottles become available. The mainstream historical fact here is clear: the development of stronger glass bottles and cork closures in the 17th century transformed wine storage, transport, aging, and sparkling wine production. A bottle could protect wine in smaller quantities, seal pressure better than many earlier containers, and allow the drink to mature in new ways. You hold an early bottle in your hands. It is darker, thicker, and less symmetrical than the elegant modern version. Its surface has tiny waves and bubbles. The base feels heavy. The neck is short and sturdy. It is not trying to win a beauty contest. It is trying not to explode, which is a noble goal. The glass is cool now, but it remembers the furnace. You run your thumb over its uneven shoulder and feel the difference between handmade object and machine perfection. Each bottle carries the small irregularities of breath and fire, Cork enters quietly, almost humbly, but it matters enormously. The bark of the cork oak is springy and resilient. When pressed into a bottleneck, it expands to seal the opening while allowing tiny, mysterious interactions with air. You feel a cork between your fingers. It is light, dry, and faintly sweet-smelling, with a woody softness. Push it into a bottle and the wine inside gains privacy. Pull it out, and the room receives a small, intimate sound, not yet the dramatic pop of celebration, but a soft release. As if the bottle has been holding a thought, cellars become laboratories without calling themselves that. You descend stone steps into the school. The temperature falls around your shoulders. The air smells of damp chalk, old wood, candle smoke, mould, and resting wine. Bottles lie on their sides in racks or straw, corks kept moist by the liquid within. Dust gathers slowly over glass. Spiders build their patient architecture in corners. Somewhere, a barrel ticks softly. The cellar is dark, but not dead. Wine changes here, quietly, through time, oxygen, sediment, temperature, and chemistry no one fully understands yet. Early modern Europe becomes more curious about nature's hidden rules. Scholars, physicians, merchants, and makers ask new questions about fermentation, gases, preservation, pressure, and spoilage. They do not all agree, and many explanations are wonderfully incomplete. Some still speak in older medical language of humours and qualities. Others measure, observe, and experiment with increasing care. Wine draws them in because it is both ordinary and puzzling. It can improve, fail, fizz, sour, darken, clear, or burst its container. A drink that refuses to stay simple is practically begging to be studied. Natural philosophers begin to notice the strange spirit released during fermentation. Bubbles rise, vapours gather, yeast works invisibly, sugar disappears, warmth appears. Something lively is happening, but the language for it is still developing. You stand beside a vat where newly fermenting must murmurs and foams. The sound is gentle, almost like distant rain. The smell is thick with fruit, bread dough, and something sharp enough to tickle the nose. Place your palm near the surface and you feel warmth rising. The vat seems alive, and in a chemical sense, it is full of living work. Scholars still debate how quickly winemakers themselves understood the practical implications of fermentation science, because craft knowledge often moved ahead of formal theory. A cellar master might know exactly what to do without explaining it in modern terms. He might understand temperature, timing, racking, and pressure by touch, habit, and failure. Written science can arrive with elegant words, but the barrel may have learned the lesson first. Now you travel into the cool northern vineyards of Champagne, where the climate is marginal. The chalk soils are pale, and the air can feel brisk even under sunlight. The vines grow under a sky that does not always promise ripeness. Grapes here may be sharp, high in acidity, and delicate in colder weather. Fermentation may stop before all sugar is consumed, then begin again when warmth returns. If wine is sealed in a strong bottle during the second awakening, carbon dioxide can dissolve into the liquid and create bubbles. Sometimes the result is charming. Sometimes it is a cellar filled with glass shrapnel and regret. The atmosphere in such a cellar is tense. Bottles sleep in rows, but sleep lightly. You hear the occasional muffled crack from somewhere in the dark. Workers pause. No one breathes. Then another bottle bursts, triggering nearby bottles in a chain of pressure and panic. Early sparkling wine could be dangerous to make. Some cellars reportedly lost large portions of their stock to explosions, earning sparkling bottles the cheerful nickname of the devil's wine in some tellings. A very dramatic name. Yes. But when your livelihood detonates at midnight, theology becomes flexible. A quirky tidbit rests inside the famous story of Dom Perignon, the Benedictine monk often credited in popular legend with inventing champagne and supposedly crying out that he was tasting stars. It is a lovely line, glittering and irresistible. It is also almost certainly not a reliable historical quotation. Dom Perignon was a real figure who contributed to winemaking practice at Hautevillers, especially in careful blending and quality control. But the simple tale of one monk inventing sparkling champagne in a single dazzling moment is more myth than fact. History, sadly, keeps taking away the best marketing copy. Still, the legend survives because sparkling wine feels like a discovery that should have a magical sentence attached. You lift a glass and watch bubbles rise in silver threads. They cling to the side, gather, release, and vanish or at the surface with tiny sighs. The sound is delicate, a faint fizz like rain on leaves far away. The aroma is crisp, yeasty, green apple, bread crust, chalky coolness, and festive danger made polite. The touch on your tongue is alive. It tingles, brightens, and disappears, leaving you slightly more awake than you intended for bedtime history. But only slightly. Bottling also changes still wine. Aging in bottle can soften harsh edges, preserve aroma, and make wine collectible. Merchants and wealthy households begin storing bottles not merely as containers, but as promises. A wine may improve over months or years. The idea of vintage deepens. A particular year becomes something to remember, compare, praise, or complain about for decades. Because wine lovers are nothing if not loyal to long conversations. Cellars fill with dates, places, and expectations. Time becomes part of the flavour. You walk into an 18th century dining room where glass decanters stand beneath candlelight. The table is polished dark wood. Crystal catches reflections. Guests speak more softly now when wine is poured. Not because they are humble, but because the ritual has become refined. A servant draws a cork carefully. There is a hush, then the fragrant air of an opened bottle. The wine is decanted to separate it from sediment. You see a dark ribbon of liquid move from bottle to vessel, steady and glistening. At the bottom, a cloudy trace remains, like memory refusing to leave. Science sharpens the tools of taste. Thermometers, hydrometers, improved presses, better cellar practices, and more systematic observation gradually influence production. Winemakers learn to manage sweetness, acidity, strength, clarity, and stability with increasing precision. They do not become modern overnight. Nothing in wine does, but the old mixture of craft, superstition, prayer, luck, and inherited habit begins to share space with measurement. The cellar master still sniffs the barrel, but now someone nearby may also write down numbers, which is how you know the age of paperwork has truly blossomed. Trade expands the demand for reliable bottles. Urban consumers want recognizable styles. Merchants want wines that survive travel. Strong bottles and corks make it easier to ship, store, and present wine attractively. Labels slowly develop from simple marks into fuller claims of place, maker, and quality. The bottle becomes a messenger. It sits on a table and announces origin before the wine touches the tongue. It also allows fraud, imitation, and exaggeration, because any new technology that carries truth can also carry nonsense with excellent posture. You pause in a bottling room. Candles flicker against damp walls. Workers fill bottles with funnels, leaving careful space. Corks are driven in. Wires or strings may secure sparkling closures. Glass clinks in rows. Hands move quickly, stained and practiced. The touch of wet cork, the smell of yeast and chalk, the scrape of crate against floor, the cool weight of sealed bottles. All of it feels like wine entering a more intimate form. A barrel belongs to many. A bottle can belong to one table, one evening, one gift, one memory. And yet, for all the science, accidents still matter. A stopped fermentation wakes again. A bottle shape proves stronger than expected. A cork seals better than planned. A cellar too cold. A spring too warm. A shipment too long at sea. All these can create surprises. Wine history is full of people explaining later what they first survived by chance. This is not a flaw. It is one of the reasons the drink remains so human. Control increases, but mystery keeps a seat at the table. Night settles outside the workshop and cellar. The furnace glow fades. The bottles rest in darkness, shoulders touching, each one holding pressure, patience, and possibility. You hear a faint tick from cooling glass, a soft drip in the cellar, a bubble rising somewhere unseen. The air is cool on your face now, carrying chalk, cork, old wood, and fruit transformed by invisible labour. You hold a glass close and watch the candlelight tremble through it. Wine has gained a new vessel, a new science, a new sparkle, and a new way of keeping time. It is no longer only poured from barrel to cup. It can be sealed, aged, carried, opened with ceremony, and released with a sound small enough to be intimate, yet bright enough to fill a room. The bottle rests in your hand like a quiet invention, and inside it, the old grape continues to breathe. You stand in a vineyard in 19th century France, and the first thing you notice is how ordinary the morning seems. The sky's pale blue. The rows of vines run neatly across the slope. A farm dog sleeps under a cart, occasionally twitching as if chasing rabbits in a private republic of dreams. From the village below comes the sound of a church bell, a blacksmith's hammer, and a woman calling to a child who is moving with that special speed children use when they are absolutely not listening. The air smells of damp soil, vine leaves, manure, old wood, and breakfast smoke curling from chimneys. Dew beads on the grass and wets your boots. When you touch a vine leaf, it feels cool and slightly rough, with tiny veins raised like a map. Everything appears alive, rooted, established. And yet, something is wrong. A grower walks beside you, silent at first. His hands are cracked, brown from sun and thickened by years of pruning. He stops near a vine whose leaves have yellowed too early. Its shoots are weak. The fruit is sparse. He bends, grips the trunk and shakes his head. No frost explains it. No drought fully explains it. The neighbouring rows still breathe green, but this plant seems tired from within, as if some invisible hand has been loosening its hold on life. He digs into the soil with a short tool. The earth breaks apart in clods, moist and dark. A smell rises, mineral and rooty, with the faint sourness of decay. He exposes the roots, and there the disaster shows itself in smallness, knotted swellings, damaged rootlets, pale insects so tiny they seem almost insulting. How can something so small ruin so much it feels unfair, which is nature's oldest specialty? This is phylloxera, the vineyard plague that devastated European wine in the 19th century. The mainstream historical fact is stark phylloxera, an aphid-like insect accidentally introduced from North America, attacked the roots of European grapevines and destroyed vast areas of vineyard across France and other parts of Europe. It spread through soil, plants, trade, and the very modern habit of moving useful things around without asking what might be travelling with them. A globalizing world brought new plants, new markets, and, hidden among them, a nearly invisible enemy with excellent timing and no manners. The insect feeds on vine roots. European grapevines, Vitis vinifera, are deeply vulnerable at the root level. The damage weakens the plant, opens pathways for infection, and slowly starves the vine. Above ground, the signs can look vague at first. Leaves fade, growth slows, grapes fail to ripen well, a patch declines, then another. Then the sickness moves like a rumour that turns out to be true. You walk through the vineyard and hear the ordinary sounds continuing with unbearable calm. Birds chirp from hedges, a cartwheel squeaks, a rooster announces himself as though any of this requires his supervision. But the farmer's face has tightened. Each fading vine is not merely a plant, it is rent, dowry, debt, tax, food, pride, and inheritance. It is the slope his father worked, the barrel he promised a merchant, the harvest song that may not be sung this year. In village cafes, the mood changes. You sit at a small wooden table darkened by years of elbows and spilled wine. The room smells of tobacco smoke, coffee, damp wool, garlic, and the sharp edge of cheap local wine. Men speak in low voices. One says it is a disease of the soil. Another says it is a punishment. Another blames imported plants, greedy merchants, bad pruning, strange weather, railway lines, foreign influence, and probably a neighbour whose goat once ate his beans. Disaster invites explanation. An explanation often arrives wearing the boots of suspicion. Scientists, growers, officials, and amateurs begin investigating. They pull up vines, examine roots, write reports, argue in academies, test treatments, and travel between regions. The crisis spreads across wine country with terrifying patience. In some places, vines seem healthy until they are already lost. A vineyard can look wounded one season and ruined the next. Imagine whole hillsides turning patchy, then brown, then empty, as though memory itself has been uprooted. The touch of the dying vine is what stays with you. The trunk is brittle in places, the bark flakes too easily. The roots, when lifted, are damaged and light, not strong enough to hold a future. Soil falls away from them in sad crumbs. Around you, farmers gather in silence. Some cross themselves. Some curse under their breath. Some stare at the fields as if staring hard enough might make the leaves green again. Scholars still debate how best to balance the causes of phylloxera's rapid spread, weighing the role of imported American vines, expanding railway networks, nursery trade, scientific curiosity, climate conditions, and delays in recognizing the insect's full life cycle. The insect was real and devastating, but the human systems that carried it mattered too. A tiny creature crossed borders because people had made borders easier to cross for plants, goods, and ideas. Wine suffered from the success of connection. The solutions proposed are desperate, brilliant, strange, and sometimes wonderfully absurd. Growers flood vineyards where possible, drowning the pest in low-lying lands. They inject chemicals into the soil, including carbon disulfide, a substance effective in some cases but dangerous, expensive, and not exactly the sort of thing you want casually handled by tired workers near lunch. They try burying toads, applying powders, planting aromatic herbs, and listening to theories that sound confident enough to be suspicious. When your livelihood is dying underground, even a bad idea can look briefly like hope. A quirky tidbit from this crisis is the wave of phylloxera cures, advertised with astonishing certainty. Inventors, salesmen, and local geniuses offered powders, devices, secret mixtures, and methods that promised salvation. Some were sincere, some were foolish, some smelled opportunity rising from panic. In one corner of Europe, a person might propose a chemical treatment. In another, someone recommends letting chickens roam the vines. Somewhere else, a pamphlet insists the answer has been obvious all along, which is usually history's way of warning you to keep your purse closed. Then comes the idea that saves the vineyards on a massive scale, grafting European grape varieties onto resistant American rootstocks. North American vine species had evolved with phylloxera and could tolerate its attacks far better. Their roots could survive where European roots failed. By grafting the fruiting wood of beloved European varieties onto American roots, growers could preserve wine styles while protecting the plant below ground. It is elegant, practical, and emotionally complicated. The vine remains itself above, but survives by accepting a foreign foundation beneath. Not everyone welcomes the answer. You enter a heated meeting in a town hall where benches creak under anxious bodies. The air is stale with wool, sweat, ink, and candle smoke. A scientist explains grafting with diagrams. A landowner demands certainty. A grower asks whether the wine will taste the same. Someone mutters that American roots cannot possibly belong in sacred French soil. Another says sacred soil is not very useful if everything planted in it dies. The room rumbles. Pride, fear, science, tradition, money, and grief all speak at once. You feel the emotional cost of the cure. Grafting is not simply a technique. It asks Europe to admit dependence on the very source of the pest. It asks old vineyards to be uprooted and replanted. It asks families to invest years before full production returns. It asks regions built on identity to trust invisible roots from elsewhere. Wine culture, so proud of place, learns that survival sometimes comes from mixture. Naturally, people argue about this for a very long time, because humans can turn rescue into an identity crisis. In a nursery, the future is being assembled by hand. Workers cut rootstock, slice scions, bind grafts, and plant young vines in ordered beds. The tools are sharp. The wood smells green and faintly bitter. Fingers move with care, fitting one living piece to another so cambium touches cambium. A grafted vine looks humble, almost fragile. It is a small union wrapped in cloth, wax, or binding. Yet inside that join sits the rebirth of European viticulture. You kneel beside a row of young grafted plants. Their leaves are small, fresh, trembling in the breeze. The soil is warm now under your palm. Bees move through clover nearby. A train whistle sounds from the valley, thin and modern. That sound matters. Railways helped carry wines, workers, rootstocks, tools, and insects. They also helped recovery. The same networks that spread disaster could spread the cure. History rarely has the decency to assign one invention to only one moral category. In older vineyards, replanting feels like mourning. Men cut dead trunks and pile them for burning. Smoke rises with a bitter, woody smell. Women gather stakes. Children carry small bundles. The hillside looks naked without its mature vines. Years of pruning shapes vanish in hours. Each root pulled from the ground leaves a dark hole. You hear axes, scraping spades, low voices, and the crackle of fire. The land is not empty. Exactly. It is waiting in a way that hurts. Some regions recover faster than others. Wealthier growers can afford grafted vines, treatments, and waiting. Poorer families may abandon vineyards, sell land, migrate to cities, or shift crops. Wine maps change. Varieties are lost, reduced, or replaced. Local traditions weaken in some places and harden in others. Fraud increases in certain markets as real wine becomes scarce, blended, stretched, or artificial products appear. Because where desire remains and supply collapses, honesty sometimes takes a holiday. You taste a wine from a recovering vineyard. It is poured in a modest glass at a farmhouse table. The room smells of stew, wood smoke, linen, and damp stone. The grower watches your face. The wine is young, sharp, alive with acidity and nervous fruit. Perhaps it is not grand. Perhaps it is not what his father made. But it exists. That zone feels enormous. He looks toward the window where new rows climb the slope, and his shoulders loosen by the smallest amount. Phylloxera changes wine's relationship with science forever. Growers become more attentive to rootstocks, pests, plant disease, nurseries, and agricultural research. Governments fund investigations, experts gain influence. Vineyards become places not only of tradition, but of biology. The romance of wine remains, but now it carries entomology under its coat. Every beautiful glass owes something to people who spent long days looking at ugly roots through magnifying lenses. Not glamorous, perhaps, but deeply heroic in the quiet agricultural sense. Evening settles over a grafted vineyard. The air cools, leaves whisper against wires and stakes. Somewhere, a horse shifts in its harness. The smell of turned soil fades into the scent of grass and distant cooking fires. The rows are young, not yet generous, but they hold, beneath the ground, resistant roots grip the earth. Above ground, European shoots reach for the last light. You stand between loss and recovery, feeling both at once. The plague has shown how fragile civilization's pleasures can be. A drink praised by kings, guarded by monks, taxed by towns, and refined by science can still be humbled by an insect almost too small to see. Yet the answer is not surrender. It is grafting, cooperation, observation, argument, and the stubborn human refusal to let a beloved vine die quietly. The night deepens. The vineyard no longer looks ruined, it looks young. The soil is dark beneath your boots. The leaves move softly in the breeze, each one catching a little moonlight. Somewhere underground, roots from one continent hold up the flavours of another. It is strange, practical, and quietly beautiful. Wine survives not by remaining untouched, but by learning how to live through change. You enter the modern world through the soft clink of a glass in a quiet kitchen. Outside the window, evening gathers over apartment blocks, tiled roofs, gardens, traffic lights, and hillsides that may be thousands of miles from the old European vineyards, yet somehow still belong to the same long story. The room is ordinary. A wooden table, a bottle standing open, a cork resting on its side like a tiny fallen log. The air smells of cooked onions, lemon peel, rain on pavement, and wine lifting from the glass in slow, fragrant waves. You pick up the glass by the stem. It feels cool at first, then gently warms where your fingers hold it. The bowl catches the last light and turns it ruby, gold, rose, amber, or pale straw, depending on what has been poured. You swirl it once, perhaps because you know what you're doing, perhaps because you have seen people do it and it feels reassuringly sophisticated. Either way, the wine moves in a small, silent tide, coating the glass and slipping back down. Wine in the modern world is both ancient and intensely organised. It belongs to family meals, religious rituals, restaurant lists, supermarket shelves, weddings, picnics, auctions, tourist routes, online reviews, export markets, and quiet evenings when nobody wants a speech about terroir. Thank you very much. A mainstream historical fact rests clearly in the glass modern wine is produced across the world, but European traditions, classifications, grape varieties, and regional identities remain deeply influential in global wine culture. You walk through a vineyard in Bordeaux, where gravel crunches beneath your shoes and neat rows stretch under a wide sky. The smell is clean and earthy, with hints of grass, damp stone, and leaves warming in the sun. A tractor hums in the distance, birds snap between hedgerows, workers move with buckets, shears, hoses, tablets, and weather data. The old gestures remain: pruning, tasting, harvesting, sorting, pressing, yet beside them come satellites, laboratory analysis, stainless steel tanks, temperature controls, and spreadsheets. Wine has not escaped paperwork. Nothing loved by humans ever does. You touch a grape cluster hanging low in the morning. The berries are firm, dusty with bloom, slightly cool from night air. A winemaker plucks one, crushes it between finger and thumb, tastes the juice, then chews the skin and seed. Sugar matters, acid matters, tannin matters, weather matters, soil matters, so does labour, Timing, equipment, law, memory, fashion, money, and luck. The modern vineyard is a place where romance and logistics stand very close together, pretending not to know each other. In Burgundy, tiny parcels of land carry enormous reputations. Stone walls divide plots with almost stubborn precision. A few meters can inspire expensive arguments. In Tuscany, vines lean toward old farmhouses and cypress roads. In Rioja, barrels sleep in cellars scented with oak and vanilla. In the Mosel, vineyards climb steep slopes where picking grapes can feel less like farming and more like negotiating with gravity. In the Douro, terraces fold around the river like ancient steps. Europe's wine regions have become landscapes of memory, protected names, legal definitions, family inheritance, and visitor dreams. Modern systems such as appellations and geographical indications try to protect the link between place and product. They define grapes, boundaries, techniques, aging rules, yields, and labels. To the casual drinker, this can seem like a maze designed by monks, lawyers, and very patient cartographers. Yet these systems also guard local identity and help consumers know what a name means. When a bottle says champagne, Chianti Classico, Rioja, Port, Sherry, Barolo, or Burgundy, it is not only naming flavour, it is naming a place shaped by climate, law, labour, and reputation. Still, wine is no longer Europe's private language. You cross oceans in a breath and stand in California, where fog rolls through coastal vineyards like a slow white animal. The air smells of eucalyptus, dry grass, ocean salt, and sun-warmed fruit. In Chile, vines stretch between mountains and sea under a hard blue sky. In Argentina, vineyards climb toward the Andes, where the light feels sharp enough to ring. In South Africa, old estates and newer producers work beneath dramatic mountains. In Australia and New Zealand, vines face heat, wind, brightness, and bold invention. The old European grape travels, adapts, and learns new accents. A quirky tidbit lives in the world of modern wine tasting. In 1976, a blind tasting in Paris placed California wines against prestigious French wines, and some California bottles scored higher than famous French examples. The event became legendary, partly because it startled assumptions about who could make great wine, and partly because experts, when surprised, make very satisfying historical material. Wine pride is delicate. A blind tasting can poke it with a very small pin. That moment did not end European importance. It widened the conversation. Modern wine became more global, more competitive, and more curious. Winemakers studied abroad. Consultants crossed borders. University programs trained specialists. New regions learned from old ones, then challenged them. Old regions borrowed technology, then insisted they had always valued precision. Everyone kept talking about tradition, usually while quietly buying better equipment. You enter a modern cellar. It is stainless steel, spotless, cold and faintly echoing. Tanks rise like silver towers. Pumps hum softly. A worker checks a valve. The air smells of yeast, wet concrete, alcohol, and clean metal. This is not the dark romantic cellar of candles and cobwebs, though those still exist and perform beautifully for visitors. Here, fermentation is monitored with care. Temperature can be adjusted, oxygen can be managed. Samples are tested, problems are caught early. Wine is still alive, but now it is live under supervision. In another cellar, barrels rest in dim rows. Oak breathes slowly into the wine, adding texture, aroma, and time. Your hand glides over a barrel's curve, smooth but grainy, cool with cellar damp. You hear a faint drip somewhere, a shoe scrape, a distant forklift beeping with absolutely no respect for atmosphere. The smell is deeper here: vanilla, toast, spice, fruit, earth, and old wood. Tradition and industry share the same air, sometimes gracefully, sometimes with mild tension. There is scholarly uncertainty here as well. Researchers and historians continue to discuss how much modern ideas of authenticity in wine come from genuine continuity with the past, and how much they are shaped by marketing, tourism, national identity, and selective memory. A village may truly preserve inherited knowledge. A label may also wrap that knowledge in a story polished for buyers. Both can be true at once. Wine is honest in the vineyard and theatrical on the shelf. It has always had a talent for costume. You walk into a wine shop in a modern city. Bottles line wooden shelves in disciplined rows. Labels show castles, animals, minimalist designs, saints, maps, moons, mountains, family crests, and fonts that appear to have attended expensive schools. The room smells of cardboard, cork, dust, and faint fruit from a tasting table. A shopkeeper asks what you like. You panic gently, because the question seems simple, but contains your budget, your dinner, your self-image, and your fear of mispronouncing Gewürztraminer. Modern wine culture can be welcoming, but it can also become intimidating. There are scores, critics, competitions, certifications, collectors, sommeliers, influencers, and people who say a wine has tension while you wonder whether the wine has unpaid bills. Yet beneath all the language, the older purpose remains. Wine gathers people. It marks meals, seasons, contracts, blessings, endings, beginnings, reunions, and ordinary nights made softer by a shared bottle. You sit at a table where several generations eat together. Someone pours red wine into small glasses. Someone else chooses not to drink and is offered sparkling water without fuss, as civilized people should manage. A child asks why adults smell the glass before drinking, and an uncle gives an answer far longer than necessary. Bread is passed. A chair scrapes. Tomato sauce scents the air. Rain taps the window. The wine is not the centre of the meal. Exactly. It is the thread running through it, loosening speech, warming memory, and slowing everyone just enough to notice being together. At the same time, modern awareness is more careful. People speak more openly about moderation, addiction, health risks, pregnancy, religion, personal choice, and the fact that no drink, however historic, needs to be everyone's drink. Wine culture at its best makes room for refusal without awkwardness. The old cup can remain meaningful without becoming compulsory. That, too, is a form of civilization, perhaps one of the quieter and kinder ones. Climate change now presses hard against vineyards. Harvest dates shift. Heat waves stress vines as drought threatens regions once considered reliable. Fires can stain grapes with smoke. New areas become possible while old areas struggle. Growers experiment with shade, irrigation, canopy management, drought-resistant rootstocks, different varieties, and new rules. You stand in a vineyard during a hot summer evening and feel the air heavy against your skin. Leaves hang still. The soil cracks near your feet. The vine endures, but endurance has limits. And yet the vine remains astonishingly adaptable. It has survived migrations, empires, monasteries, taxes, fashion, glass, chemistry, insect, fraud, war, and the opinions of dinner guests. It keeps asking for seasons. It keeps answering in fruit. Modern wine is a global business, yes, worth fortunes, wrapped in law and branding and shipping routes, but it is also still a plant climbing towards sun, a farmer watching clouds, a cellar worker listening to fermentation, a person lifting a glass at dusk. You return to the quiet kitchen. The bottle is half full. The evening has deepened. Somewhere outside, tires hiss on wet pavement, a refrigerator hums, a spoon rests in a bowl. The wine in your glass holds more than flavour. It holds hillsides, rivers, clay, oak, glass, trade, prayer, science, disease, recovery, celebration, and restraint. It civilized Europe not by making people perfect, clearly, let us not get carried away, but by teaching habits that built shared life patience, hospitality, craft, memory, law, pleasure, and conversation. Now the story softens. The glass rests on the table, catching only a little light. The room grows quieter around you. The vineyard paths become shadowed and mild. The rows of vines fade into gentle lines beneath a darkening sky. You hear leaves moving in a low breeze, the small creak of a cellar door, the far murmur of people at supper, and then only the slow breathing of night. The scent of fruit, earth, wood, and rain drifts together, less sharp now, more like a memory held in both hands. You do not need to follow every road the wine has travelled. You can let the long history settle, like sediment in a calm bottle. The cup is still. The table is warm beneath your fingers. Outside, the world continues softly, and the old vine sleeps under stars, waiting for morning, waiting for weather, waiting for another season of light